Darkness covered the Havenbrook sky. Black clouds swirled and covered the moon and stars. Beneath the cold sky, the snowstorm roared like a mad beast, carrying with it cold winds that cut through the skin. Snow fell heavily, covering everything in white, turning the forest into a silent, dead world. But in the midst of the brutal scene of nature, a small creature was fighting its cruel fate. A mother dog, her golden fur now ragged and matted by ice and cold snow. She lay motionless in the white night, her body trembling, her breath weak like a candle about to go out. 6 tiny puppies, only a few weeks old, were curled up under their mother's belly, their big, round eyes sparkling with fear. They tried to burrow deep into their mother's fur that no longer had warmth, looking for a little safety in the merciless storm. Their mother, Hope, had lost her strength. All day she had endured, using her last breath to protect her children from the merciless cold. The food had long since run out. Her body was emaciated, her ribs visible under her thin fur. But despite her exhaustion, she would not let any of her children be swept away. The strong winds beat against Hope like harsh whips. The snow clung thickly to her back, covering her as if to make her a part of this cold land forever. The children cried out weakly, small but desperate moans. They did not know what awaited them. They did not know why their mother had lain motionless. They did not know that without a miracle, they would not survive the night. But then a sound rang out. Amidst the howling winds and the heavy snowfalls, there was a different sound, something other than the roar of nature. Clang, clang. Footsteps. The snow was knee-deep, but someone was moving, coming toward them. Hope had no strength to open her eyes, but her maternal instincts could sense the change in the air. An unfamiliar scent drifted through the air, a human scent, something she had once known but now felt distant. Was this person a savior? Or just another nightmare? The puppies, weak as they were, began to sense the presence. One of them let out a soft whimper, but in the midst of the storm, it was only a faint whisper on the wind. The footsteps were getting closer. Hope tried to lift her head, but her exhausted body would not obey. All she could do was lie still, waiting for fate to decide the future of her and her pups. The storm continued to roar. The snow continued to fall. But in the midst of this cruel night, there is a glimmer of hope. Will that person arrive in time? Or will Hope and her children be forever drowned in this endless storm? The wind howled, whipping against the small windows of the lonely wooden house on the edge of Havenbrook. The flickering firelight reflected on the aged face of Martha Parker, a retired teacher who had lived alone in the house for over 20 years. She loved quiet evenings like this, sitting by the fire, sipping hot tea, and losing herself in the pages of old books. But tonight was different. The storm was fierce. The snow was falling steadily, the wind sweeping through the woods, whipping sheets of ice from the roofs. No one was out on the streets on a night like this. The small town was quiet, the dim streetlights illuminating a patch of cold white snow. Martha pulled her woolen scarf tightly around her shoulders, her eyes following the dancing flames in the fireplace. But her mind was preoccupied with something else. Her stack of firewood was almost empty. She sighed. If we don't get more firewood, we'll be freezing by morning, she told herself. Living alone had taught her to take care of herself. Even though she was over 60, she was strong enough to take care of herself. Tonight, despite the blizzard, she had no choice but to go out and get more firewood. Wrapping her thick coat tightly around her, pulling her woolen cap over her head, and pulling her scarf tight around her neck, Martha stepped outside. The cold wind immediately cut into her flesh like sharp knives. She shivered, but continued on step by step across the backyard where she kept the pile of firewood. The snow was up to her knees, and each step was heavy. As she approached the pile of firewood, she bent down slightly, shaking the thick layer of snow off the logs. But then something made her stop. A sound. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but no, the sound was fainter, more trembling. She held her breath. A soft moan, broken by the howling wind. She turned her head, looking toward the woods outside the yard. The thick snow obscured her vision, but her instincts told her there was something out there. She squinted, trying to see through the blinding snow. Then she saw it. A shadowy, motionless shape blending into the white. Her heart suddenly raced. What is it? She muttered, taking a step forward, then hesitating. She had lived in Havenbrook long enough to know. That winter was unforgiving. A creature left outside in this weather was a death sentence. The moan came again, fainter than before. She tightened her grip on her scarf, then took a deep breath. Whatever it is, it needs help. Without further hesitation, she stepped forward into the mysterious darkness in the thick snow, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Martha walked slowly toward the darkness and the snow, her old legs sinking deeper into the snow with each step. Her heart pounded harder as the low moaning sound came again, faint, fragile, but enough to keep her going. The cold wind whipped at her face, as if to stop the old woman's steps. But she didn't care. She had lived through many harsh winters, but she had never heard such a heartbreaking sound. When they were only a few feet away, her eyes widened in horror. A mother dog. It lay collapsed on the white snow, its body so thin that you could see its ribs protruding through its matted, yellow fur. Snow covered its ragged fur, making it a part of the cold land. Its body was almost motionless, only its chest moving faintly. But what shocked Martha even more were the 6 little creatures huddled against her belly. 6 puppies. The little creatures shivered, their fragile bodies wrapped tightly together against the cold. They didn't cry. Only small whimpers escaped their weak breaths. Martha fell to her knees. Oh my God! Her voice choked, tears welling up in her eyes as she placed her trembling hands on the mother dog's body. It was cold. So cold she felt like she was touching ice. But it was still breathing. A glimmer of hope flashed in her eyes. Hang on, honey, she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. She ran her hand up the mother dog's neck and was shocked to see something. An iron chain wrapped around its neck, connected to an old wooden stake driven into the ground. Martha felt a surge of anger. Who did this? Who could have the heart to tie up a mother dog and her puppies in the middle of a deadly blizzard? Her hands clenched, but there was no time for anger. The puppies were dying in the cold, and if she didn't act now, neither they nor their mother would survive the night. Martha hastily took off her scarf, wrapping the puppies tightly in it. Once the little creatures were wrapped, she pressed them to her chest, trying to transfer her body's warmth to them. A soft whimper rang out. She raised her head. The mother dog, so exhausted that she could barely lift her head, still tried to shift her body, as if to protect her babies from her. Martha's heart clenched. Even as she was dying, she was still trying to protect her puppies. She gently placed her hand on its head, whispering, "It's okay. I won't hurt you. I'll save you." The mother dog's cloudy eyes opened briefly, meeting Martha's loving gaze. Though she couldn't speak, her gaze said it all. Trust. Martha took a deep breath, then used her trembling hands to undo the cold chain around a mother dog's neck. But the chain was too tight. She tried to pull hard, but it wouldn't budge. Someone had locked it with a small padlock, leaving no chance for the mother dog to escape. Martha gritted her teeth. She didn't have a key, and she didn't have time to figure out how to open the lock. If she didn't act now, the mother dog would die here. Without hesitation, Martha reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small knife, the kind of folding knife she always carried for cutting rope or peeling fruit when needed. She slid the blade between the chains and tried to cut them. But the chains were too thick, and she didn't have enough strength. The mother dog let out another whine, weaker than before. Martha panicked. No, she couldn't let it die. She looked around, searching for anything that could help her. Then her eyes fell on a large rock nearby, half buried under a thick layer of snow. Without thinking, she quickly picked up the rock and slammed it down on the lock with all her might. Bang! The lock shook but didn't break. Martha tightened her grip on the rock, hitting it again and again. Bang! 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 Finally, there was a loud click. The lock snapped, and the chain fell into the snow. Martha, unable to rejoice, hastily lifted the mother dog up, feeling its thin, almost lifeless body in her arms. "I'll take you home. You'll all be safe," she whispered, squeezing the puppies tightly to her chest, then used all her strength to stand up, heading towards her small house. Each step she took was heavy. The snow continued to fall, but she ignored it all. Because for the first time in years, she felt her heart beating stronger than ever. She would not let them die. The storm continued to roar behind her. But for Martha, all she cared about right now were the 6 little creatures trembling in her arms, and the mother dog, Hope, fighting for her own life. A battle that had no end. But at least tonight they had a chance. The storm was still roaring over Havenbrook, the wind like sharp blades cutting into every fiber of the flesh. The snow continued to fall thickly, covering every trace, as if it wanted to erase everything that existed in this dead winter night. But in the cold darkness, an old woman was walking, holding tightly to her chest 6 small creatures and a dying mother dog. Martha felt her body gradually giving out. Each step sank deeper into the snow as if it wanted to pull her down, hold her in this cold land. But she had no choice. If she stopped, if she delayed even a little, she knew that the little creatures in her arms would no longer have a chance to survive. The mother dog's breathing grew weaker, her body felt light in her arms, as if at any moment it could melt into the white snow. "Don't give up, my dear. Don't give up," Martha whispered, holding the thin body tightly to her chest. She had seen too much loss in her life, too much injustice. But tonight she could not accept another departure. The puppies were wrapped tightly in her thick woolen scarf, they no longer made a sound. That made Martha even more afraid. When they were still crying, they still had strength. But this silence, it was more terrifying than anything. She had to hurry. She adjusted the mother dog in her arms, then crouched down, using all her remaining strength to walk faster through the blinding snow. The storm had no mercy, but people did. Martha finally saw the faint light from the window of her wooden house. The warm light was like a beacon, pulling her out of the deadly darkness. She staggered, feeling her legs no longer had the strength to continue. But in her mind, there was only one thought: they must live. She stumbled right in front of the door, but quickly got up, using all her strength to push the door open. The warmth from the fireplace immediately poured out, enveloping her and the shivering creatures in her arms. She closed the door with a light kick, then staggered toward the fireplace, where the fire was still burning. Martha placed the mother dog on a thick blanket, then unwrapped the puppies. They were still alive. Though weak, the puppies still stirred slightly, eyes closed, small breaths puffing. White smoke into the air. She immediately took a soft towel, gently wiped the snow off their bodies, then pulled another blanket over them, trying to retain every bit of fragile warmth. But the mother dog, Hope, still didn't move. She knelt down, pressed her hand to its chest, trying to find heartbeat. A weak beat. Still very weak, but still alive. She rushed to the kitchen, poured a bowl of warm water, and returned to Hope's side. She gently lifted her head, holding the bowl to her mouth. "Drink, honey, hold on." Hope didn't move. Martha's heart clenched. Had she come too late? But then a slight movement. Hope's head shook slightly, her eyes opening a little. A weak, dull gaze, but still alive. With a mighty effort, she licked the bowl of water. Just a little, but enough for Martha to breathe a sigh of relief. "Okay, honey, good job. We'll be fine." She continued to gently massage Hope's body, trying to get her blood flowing again. Her old hands trembled, but she didn't stop. The hours passed in tense silence. The puppies were warming up now, moving more, their little legs kicking as if they were dreaming. Hope was still very weak, but at least she wasn't lying still. Martha leaned back in her chair, watching the little creatures slowly regain their warmth. She sighed, feeling a little relieved for the first time that night. They had made it through the first crisis. But she knew the ordeal wasn't over yet. Hope might survive the night, but without proper medical care, she might not make it through the next few days. Martha turned back to look out the window. The storm continued to rage outside. She needed help, and she knew what to do next. Tomorrow, when the sun came up, she would go find Dr. Carter. Hope and her pups had a chance, and she won't let anything take that chance away. Martha sat by the fire, her trembling hands still gently massaging Hope's thin body, trying to inject some warmth into her cooling body. She had never seen such a resilient creature in her life, a mother who, even when close to death, would not give up hope to protect her pups. Underneath the warm blankets, the 6 puppies were slowly recovering, their breathing more even, their weak whimpers now replaced by small movements, their tiny legs kicking each other as if in a dream. But Hope still lay motionless, her weak breathing the only sign that she was still alive. Martha looked at Hope, her eyes softening. "You did so well," she whispered, her hands continuing to stroke Hope's snow-matted fur. But despite Martha's efforts to warm her, Hope showed no signs of improvement. She knew that without immediate medical attention, this mother dog might not make it through the night. Martha gritted her teeth. She couldn't let that happen. She stood up, quickly pulled on a thick coat, and reached for her old phone. Her hand shook as she scrolled through the contacts, searching for a familiar name. Dr. Emily Carter, the only veterinarian in town. She pressed call, holding the phone to her ear, hoping that Emily was still awake. Each ring rang out tensely. Then finally a tired but worried voice said, "Hello, Martha. What's wrong?" Martha took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice calm. "Emily, I need you right away. I have a very tired mother dog and 6 puppies. Without help, she won't make it through the night." On the other end of the line, Emily's voice suddenly became more alert. "Are you serious? Where?" "At my house. I just found them in the middle of the storm." Hope was half frozen out there, chained up in the snow, and her pups weren't much better. There was a brief pause, then Emily said firmly, "Keep her warm, Martha. I'll be right there." Martha breathed a sigh of relief, but when she turned back to look at Hope, her worry had not left her mind. Would Hope last until Emily got here? 15 minutes later, there was a series of loud knocks on the door. Martha rushed to open it and found Emily standing there, covered in snow, holding a bag of supplies. "You came so fast," Martha exclaimed, pulling her inside. Emily didn't say anything, just knelt down beside Hope, carefully checking her vital signs. She touched the mother dog's chest, listening to the weak heartbeat, then ran her hand down her thin body. After a tense silence, Emily sighed. "She's weak, but she still has a chance. I'll give her a shot of anti-shock and an 4 to keep her hydrated. But Martha, we have to be prepared. If this continues, she may not make it." Martha's heart sank. "No, she has to live," she whispered. Emily looked at her, then nodded gently. "We'll do everything we can." She quickly took out a syringe, drew out a small dose of medicine, and gently injected it into Hope's vein. Then she prepared a small 4 bag, using a fine needle to infuse fluids into Hope's exhausted body. The next few minutes seemed like centuries. Martha and Emily sat beside Hope, silently watching her weak breaths. The puppies, now warmer, began to stir and crawl around the blanket, as if searching for their mother. And then something magical happened. Hope stirred. At first it was just a twitch of her ears, then a small whimper, and finally her eyes slowly opened. Martha let out a gasp, tears welling up in her eyes. "Sweetheart," she whispered, reaching out to stroke the top of Hope's head. Hope couldn't lift her head, but her eyes were a little more alive. She moved her nose, trying to sense the air around her. Then, with a surprising amount of effort, Hope lifted her head slightly, giving Martha's hand a quick lick. As if in thanks, Martha burst into tears. Emily smiled in relief, too. "That's a good sign," she said, checking Hope's heartbeat. "He's still weak, but at least he's responding." Martha leaned down, pressing her forehead against Hope's. "You'll be fine. I promise." Hope closed her eyes, as if she believed that promise. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside the small house, a warm light had been lit, spreading warmth among the souls fighting for their lives. Hope had survived the night, but the road ahead was still long. The weak sun broke through the thick fog of the winter morning. The snowstorm had stopped, but the cold wind still blew, carrying the cruel breath of the harsh winter. Snow covered the roofs and streets, turning the entire town of Havenbrook into a white picture, quiet but cold. Inside the small wooden house, the fire still flickered in the fireplace, warming the souls that had almost lost their lives in the storm last night. Martha gently pulled the blanket back over Hope. The mother dog was still very weak, but her eyes were open, full of fatigue but also warmer than last night. The puppies snuggled into their mother's belly, occasionally letting out small whimpers. They were not fully recovered, but at least they were no longer cowering from the cold. Martha smiled, gently stroking Hope's head. "You did very well, Hope," she whispered. Emily, the veterinarian who had stayed overnight to monitor Hope, let out a sigh of relief. She put the stethoscope down on the table and turned to Martha with a tired but hopeful smile. "We saved her, but she still needs time to recover. Hope needs proper food, medicine, and care. So do the puppies." Martha nodded. She knew. But there was a problem. She didn't have enough food for them. She had only enough food for herself this winter. Now she needed a lot more food for the puppies who needed to be fed. Emily seemed to read her mind. "Martha," she said, "you can't do this alone. I think it's time to ask the town for help." Martha was silent. She was an independent woman, never one to ask for help. But as she looked down at the little creatures huddled together by the fire, she knew that this time she couldn't do it all by herself. She sighed, then nodded. Okay. But do you think people will care? Emily laughed. You know what kind of town Havenbrook is. Here, no one gets left behind, not even a human or a small animal. Word spread, and it did. Within hours of Emily returning to town and telling the story, all of Havenbrook knew about Martha and the dogs. The story of a mother dog chained up in a blizzard, fiercely protecting her 6 puppies, touched everyone's hearts. The next morning, as Martha was struggling to prepare breakfast for Hope and her pups, she heard a knock at the door. She opened the door and was immediately surprised. Millie, the town's most popular baker, stood there, holding a large bag of food. I hear you're raising a special family, Millie smiled. I thought you might need a little extra food. Before Martha could react, Millie had placed the bag in her hands, containing minced meat, warm milk, dog biscuits, and a new wool blanket. Martha was so moved that she was speechless. Thank you, Millie. But the surprises didn't end there. A few minutes later, one by one, the townspeople appeared at her door. Mr. George, the cattle rancher, brought a sack of hay to make a nest for the puppies. Miss Hannah, the seamstress, presented Martha with a new set of warm clothes, knowing that she had sacrificed her own wool blanket to keep the puppies warm. Even the children in town came, bringing their old toys to give to the puppies. On the small table in Martha's cozy kitchen, food, medicine, and warm blankets were piled high, filled with the love and care of kind people. Martha watched them all silently, her eyes watering with emotion. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Millie smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to say anything, Martha. We help each other at Havenbrook. Hope felt the love. Hope seemed to sense the change, too. When Martha returned, the mother dog had struggled to lift her head, her tired but grateful eyes looking around the warm room. Her puppies were still sleeping soundly, wrapped in thick blankets. Martha sat down next to Hope, gently stroking her head. See, Hope? You're not alone anymore, she whispered. Hope let out a long breath, then suddenly lifted one leg and placed it lightly on Martha's hand. The small action made her heart swell. Hope understood. Hope knew that she and her children were truly safe. Outside, the snow still covered the town, but inside the small cabin, a warm fire was lit, a fire of love, compassion, and the solidarity of good people. Hope and her children had a home, and from now on, they would never be abandoned again. Havenbrook winters were never kind. The days after the snowstorm were still bitterly cold, but inside Martha's little cabin, a warm fire burned, not only from the hearth, but from the love and care the entire town had shown Hope and her pups. Hope had recovered somewhat thanks to Martha and Emily's devoted care. Martha, however, noticed that the mother dog was not as strong as before. She still ate, still licked her little pups, but there was something in her eyes that worried Martha. She couldn't explain it, but a nagging unease crept into her heart. Hope didn't cry out in pain, but her body was noticeably thinner, despite Martha's best efforts to feed her. Nutritious meals were prepared every day, and Emily's regular injections helped Hope recover. But something was still wrong. One evening, as the puppies slept soundly by the fire, Martha sat down beside Hope, gently stroking her matted golden fur. How are you feeling, Hope? She whispered. Hope opened her eyes, her deep brown eyes looking at her, as if she wanted to say something. Then, very slowly, she lifted a paw and placed it lightly on her hand. Martha's heart clenched. It was like the first time Hope had realized she was safe. But this time, there was something different. It felt like a goodbye. The heartbreaking truth, the next morning, Emily returned to check on Hope. She had a more complete medical kit and a more serious face than usual. Martha, I think we should run some more tests on Hope, she said, as she gently touched the mother dog's body. Something's wrong. She's still eating, but she's not gaining weight. She's weak despite all the good care she's been given. Martha felt a chill run down her spine. I think something's wrong with her. Emily hesitated for a moment, then sighed softly. I'm not sure, but it could be a bone cancer. Martha was stunned. Cancer? Emily nodded, her eyes filled with regret. Osteosarcoma. It's a type of bone cancer that's very common in large dogs like golden retrievers. Hope's symptoms are very similar to that. Martha put her hand to her mouth, trying to stop a sob. She looked down at Hope, the mother dog still lying quietly on the blanket, her eyes gentle as she watched her puppies as if nothing had happened. No, it couldn't be. But she's still so young, she whispered. Emily nodded, but her voice was full of sorrow. Osteosarcoma can happen at any age. If it did, it would have been progressing for a long time without anyone noticing. Maybe because she had suffered so much, starved for so long, her body was weaker than normal, causing the disease to progress faster. Martha felt a dull ache in her heart. She had hoped that Hope would make a full recovery, that she would be able to live a happy life with her children. But now she realized that might never come true. When Emily left, Martha sat down next to Hope. She didn't say anything. She just gently placed her hand on her head, feeling the warmth that remained in her weak body. Hope didn't know she was sick. She only knew that she was with her puppies and that they still needed her. Martha looked at the puppies, one by one, sleeping soundly, unaware that their mother might not be with them much longer. She blinked, feeling a tear roll down her cheek. Hope had given everything she had to protect her puppies through the blizzard. Now it was her turn. She wouldn't let Hope go alone. She would be with her, she would care for her, she would let her know that she was loved. And when that moment came, Hope wouldn't be afraid. She took Hope's paw, squeezing it gently. "I promise you, Hope," she whispered. "You will never be alone again." Hope groaned softly, then closed her eyes, her head nuzzling against her hand in response. Outside, the winter was still cold and harsh. But inside the small house, an unshakable love was growing, a love that needed no words, but could warm even the coldest of hearts. The morning in Havenbrook was quieter than usual. The snowflakes fell lightly on the roof, reflecting the weak sunlight, creating a quiet and peaceful scene. But inside Martha's small house, the atmosphere was heavy with an indescribable sadness. Hope was still lying on the warm blanket near the fireplace, breathing slowly and tiredly. Despite her best efforts, Martha knew that Hope's time was running out. But there was one thing that still bothered her, Hope's old necklace. It had faded with age, but when Martha touched it, she realized that there was a small pocket sewn shut inside the leather. She frowned, carefully used her fingers to separate the worn leather, and a small piece of paper fell out. Martha picked it up, unfolding the old folds of the paper, her eyes gradually widening as she read the scribbled words inside. A letter from the past asterisk, "If anyone finds her, please take care of her. I have no choice. I love her, but I can't keep her with me anymore. I've done everything I can, but I can't let her starve. Her name is Hope. Please give her another chance." Asterisk. Martha paused, her hand shaking as she held the piece of paper. Someone had loved Hope. Someone had been forced to make a painful decision to give her up in the hopes that someone else would find her and save her. Her heart ached at the thought. She pictured someone, a woman perhaps, holding Hope in her arms one last time, kissing her forehead before tying that chain to a cold wooden stake in the winter night. How much pain it must have felt to turn away, knowing she had no choice. Martha sighed, her eyes following Hope, who was looking at her with tired but trusting eyes. Hope had been abandoned, but not hated. She had been loved, just in a way that was too harsh to keep. Hope's promise. Martha gently placed the letter on the table, then leaned down, stroking Hope's soft fur. "I don't know who wrote this," she whispered. "But I know one thing for sure, you deserve a happy life." Hope blinked, her deep brown eyes seeming to understand her every word. Beside Hope, the puppies were still sleeping soundly, unaware of their mother's weakening. Martha took a deep breath, then gently picked up one of the puppies, placing it close to Hope's face. Hope moved slightly, her wet nose brushing against her pups, as if she were sending the world into that one touch. Martha bit her lip to stop the tears from welling up. "You've done well, Hope," she said, her voice breaking. "I promise I'll take care of your children. They'll have a good life, and I'll never let them be abandoned." Hope sighed, her eyes closing in peace. Martha didn't know if Hope would live long enough to see her children grow up. But she knew one thing for sure, Hope wouldn't die alone. She took the letter and placed it gently on the mantelpiece, a symbol of faith, love, and sacrifice. She wouldn't let Hope's story end in sadness. Hope deserved better. Havenbrook's winter was not over yet, but a great change was taking place in Martha's little house. Hope's puppies were growing bigger and stronger. They began to crawl around the room, exploring every corner of the warm house, playing with each other, poking at the quilts that Martha had tried so hard to keep intact. Their little barks echoed in the cold morning, bringing new life to this once lonely house. Hope was still there, but her strength was fading. Even though her body was no longer able to resist the disease, she still tried to follow her puppies every step, still licking them gently whenever they touched her, as a reminder that she was still here, still loving them unconditionally. Martha sat beside Hope, her eyes gentle, but not hiding her worry. "You did so well, Hope," she whispered, stroking the mother dog's head. "Look at your pups, they're growing." Hope groaned softly, her eyes on her little ones with quiet satisfaction. A community that leaves no one behind news about Hope and her pups had spread throughout Havenbrook. Most people had heard of the touching story of a mother dog abandoned in the middle of a snowstorm, yet still fiercely protecting her pups. The community had never been indifferent to such a story. Millie, the bakery owner, had set up a donation box in her shop. A handwritten sign on the counter read, "Fun for Hope and her pups. Give them a fresh start." Coins, small bills, even dog food and toys quickly filled the donation box. People in town came to visit Martha more often. They brought small gifts, a bag of food, a new blanket, or just came to play with the puppies. The children in town were especially fond of the puppies. They named each one Sunny, Daisy, Lucky, Milo, Buddy, and Max. Each puppy had its own personality. Sunny and Daisy were always happy to run around. Lucky was the naughtiest of the lot, and Milo snuggled up to Martha when it was cold. Martha looked at the little creatures, her heart filled with love. She knew that Hope had not fought in vain. Hope, a legacy of love, although her illness had weakened Hope, she still fought hard every day to see her puppies grow up. She no longer had the strength to run, but her eyes followed her little ones every step. One afternoon, Martha decided to do something special for Hope. She grabbed a thick blanket, wrapped Hope in it, and opened the door to lead her out into the snow. Despite her weakness, Hope raised her head, took a deep breath, and smelled the winter she was used to. Beside her, her 6 little children were jumping in the snow, playing and running around their mother. Hope closed her eyes, listening to the happy sounds of their children. Martha knew that Hope was enjoying every last moment with her children. She sat down next to Hope, stroking her faded fur. "I will find each of your children a good home," she promised. "And I will not let them be abandoned like you were." Hope moaned softly, then licked her hand, as if in agreement. Outside, the town of Havenbrook continued its normal life. But to Martha and the townspeople, Hope's story had become something special. A story of resilience. A story of unconditional love. A story of unity and compassion. Hope had a difficult life, but she did not die quietly. She left behind a legacy, a lesson in sacrifice and love, not only for those who saved her, but for this small town. And Martha knows that when the final moment comes, Hope will die peacefully, surrounded by those who loved her most. Havenbrook greeted the new day with pale sunlight filtering through the white snow. Winter was not yet over, but something was changing in the hearts of the townspeople, something warmer than the fire in the fireplace, emanating from Martha's small house. Inside the house, Hope lay still on the warm blanket, her gentle eyes following her little children playing by the fire. They were bigger, stronger, their little legs no longer trembling from the cold. They ran around Martha, playful, nibbling at the hem of her coat whenever they wanted attention. But Hope no longer had the strength to run after them. Martha knew this day would come. She sat down next to Hope, gently running her hand through her golden fur, feeling her weak but loving heartbeat. Hope had fought long enough. She had protected her children through the devastating storm, survived the painful days. But now her body was tired, and it was time for her to rest. Martha smiled softly, though tears were streaming down her cheeks. "You have done well, Hope," she whispered. "Now rest in peace. I promise I will care for your children, as you have always done, with all my love." Hope let out a soft sigh, as if she understood the promise. Beside her, the little ones still did not realize what was happening. They continued to play, barking small, clear sounds, carrying the sound of life. Martha leaned down, gently kissing the top of Hope's head. She no longer had to worry. She no longer had to suffer. She had completed her mission, leaving behind her 6 little souls in this world, and a story that no one could forget. Hope is never forgotten. A few days later, the town of Havenbrook held a small ceremony for Hope. No one forced them, no one invited them. They came because they wanted to. People gathered in front of Martha's little house, carrying flowers, small candles, and the dog biscuits that Hope had loved. A small wooden plaque was placed under the large tree in Martha's yard, where Hope often sat watching over her children. It was engraved with a simple but meaningful message: Hope, you were not abandoned. You were always loved. Martha looked at the plaque, her heart filled with indescribable emotions. Hope had not only changed the lives of her children, she had changed the town. Somehow, Hope's story had brought everyone together. They helped more than just a mother dog and her puppies. They learned to love and protect each other, even when the world outside was cruel and cold. New beginnings. A few weeks later, Hope's puppies were adopted by kind families in town. Sunny and Daisy went to live with Millie, where they played in the fragrant bakery every day. Lucky was adopted by a young couple. They said they'd always wanted a dog to accompany them on their hikes. Milo stayed with Martha. He was the smallest, weakest of the litter, but there was something in his eyes that made Martha know she couldn't let him go. And Buddy and Max? They were adopted by two kids in town, kids who used to come to Martha's house every day to play with the puppies, and now they had lifelong companions. Martha watched each of them leave, knowing they were moving on to a new life, happy and full of love. And she knew that Hope would be happy to see it too. A promise kept. One evening, as the snow began to fall again, Martha sat in a rocking chair near the fireplace, watching Milo curled up in her lap. He was fast asleep, his steady breathing like soft music that soothed her heart. She looked up at the fireplace, where she still had the old letter she had found tucked into Hope's collar. Please give her another chance. Martha smiled. I did it, Hope. You have a meaningful life, and your children will never have to suffer what you have. The wind blew softly through the window, like an answer. She closed her eyes, listening to the crackle of the fire, to the sound of Milo stirring in his sleep. She knew that Hope was still there, not in the form of a strong mother dog, but in the memories, in the love she had for her, and in the puppies enjoying the life Hope had dreamed for them. Hope was gone, but she would never be forgotten. And that promise, that she would always be loved, had been kept.